One of the greatest scholars of Sufism was a man named Al-Ghazali. And Ghazali was someone who was not just a Sufi. He was a master theologian. He was a master legal scholar. He commented on the Quran. He knew jurisprudence. He knew all of the major religious sciences in Islam. But he was also a Sufi. And he talked about these various forms of practicing virtue. So he said, virtue is not something, I shouldn't say he said, this is an exact quote, but the idea that comes across in his theory is that virtue is not something that we have naturally, right? We might have some virtues naturally. But virtue is something that we have to grow within ourselves, and it needs a certain kind of environment in order to grow, a certain sort of fertile environment. And part of that is the basic requirements of Islam. Right? He says a person will pray 5 times a day because he or she believes that in doing so, he or she will avoid hellfire. Or they might do it because they believe they will attain good things in paradise. But eventually, by giving their mandatory zakat every year, they might come to love and appreciate charity in general. They might do what the Quran recommends people to do, which is to give over and above that amount. But in doing so, they might still feel themselves to be very virtuous. Right? Yes, I gave $10,000 to such and such. But real virtue is when that charity becomes your nature. You give not because of some reward in this world, not because of a reward in the next, but because it is your nature, because it is inherent in you. You have transformed yourself in that way, right? And the same thing with prayer. You pray every day because you need to pray every day, and then maybe you might pray more than you need to. And that might go on until you achieve what a Sufi would say is a constant state of prayer, where everything that you do is a prayer. And Ghazali talks about love, which for him is one of the highest virtues, to achieve perfect love of God. But he said we can't just love God when we're 3 years old, right? We don't even know what love means. So he said the first experience that any of us have with love is that we love ourselves, right? And then eventually we learn that we love our mothers because our mothers do all kinds of nice things for us, or our parents, or our relatives, or our friends. And we love people, why? Because they do nice things for us, right? It's all based on love of ourselves. And eventually we love our spouse and our children. As we go through life, the loves that we have are bit by bit detached from our own self-love until we finally get to the state of love itself, right? Which is love for the sake of God or loving in God. So for Ghazali, these kinds of virtues were things that had to grow over time. They weren't things that came naturally, right? And Sufism was the practice of trying to inculcate those virtues. But as important as Sufism was, the idea of developing this kind of virtue is not something that is limited to people who are Sufis, but it's something that was very much part of mainstream Islam. Okay? And it's something that is really embedded in this concept of ihsan.